Oriental city. People say it's a little China. When I went back, what I found was that the unfortunate thing was that Chinatown was now selling old fridges, whereas when I was there, every other shop was a Chinese restaurant of varying sorts. That you could walk past a door which said the New China Club and hear the click, click, click as they played mahjong, gambled whatever they'd got. It was fun. It was wonderful. It was exciting. Now, Chinatown in Vancouver, the last time I was there anyway, wasn't exciting at all. Because the Chinese community, naturally, as they integrate, they don't want to live in what, to all intents and purposes, I suppose, was considered to be a ghetto. And so their culture goes with them. There are still lots of nice Chinese restaurants in Vancouver, but they're scattered all over the place. There isn't the excitement of a Chinatown. The reason that I am mentioning that, apart from which Vancouver is a very nice place to visit, by the way, if you're thinking once we're in lockup that you would want to go somewhere, try Vancouver. Lovely place. A lovely, lovely city indeed, although not the city that I remember. But I was on the police beat there as a journalist, and I remember speaking to an inspector, and he said the Chinese were very, very lovely people. They monitored their own community. They were raised according to very strict standards. A Chinese family understood values and so on. And he said I had a blotter, a police blotter, a file, and I had 2 pieces of paper in it for crimes committed by the Chinese community. Once they had the influx from the Red Revolution, is it Madame Mao got cracking, is that file, those 2 pieces of paper not only increased in the file, but he suddenly had several piles, because the escapees were the naughty guys, and we embraced them. Is there anything you can do about it? I don't know. I suppose there's no way of telling during turmoil in the country whether somebody's a good guy or a bad guy. But the fact is, it's the bad guys who know how to manipulate the system. It's the bad guys who realise here's an opportunity to get out and go to a foreign country. But can they stop their naughty ways? No, they cannot. And so they enter fertile ground, and suddenly, it's quite often in this country, God bless them, because I love the people of the Balkans, but quite often it is that there are naughty Kosovars, naughty Albanians, naughty Serbs who crop up on the police blotter, and we all turn around and say, why do they come here? How do we let them in? It's very difficult to tell, because quite often the countries they're escaping from, the records are kept either very secret or they're destroyed as a revolution begins to succeed. So it's always a very difficult issue. Right, back to Ferenc Puskás, who escaped from the Hungarian Revolution. He continued to delight the world with his football, and then he sort of escaped from public attention for a little while. I, as part of my remit in Vancouver, being freelance, would cover the courts and do the other basic things where you learn your journalism in the daytime, and on the weekends I would do sport. And I looked after the non-Canadian sports, if you like, football, rugby, our football, soccer, grass hockey as they call it, rowing, and other things which were not necessarily native to the Canadian culture, which is strongly influenced. I don't think Canadians will mind me saying this, even though they fiercely defend their independence, based on the United States culture, and so it's not surprising. I mean, Canada, I think, is about 50 million, and the United States is 250 million, and rising. So the influences can be expected. But one of the things that I did was I covered the early stages of professional football. And I went down to San Francisco with what were known then as the Vancouver Royals, professional football club, the very first one. And they played the San Francisco Golden Gales, one of the first in the United States. It was in the Oakland A's, I think it is, stadium, the baseball stadium. And there would have been about, in those early days, before the game got a grip, 500 spectators. We hung microphones over the edge of the press box to try and get somebody cheering, so it didn't sound as if the stadium was completely empty. They were brave days. They were brave people. They believed in what they had as a sport and that it would catch on in the United States, and of course it has today. But those were long days ago, and those were the pioneers. But after the match, I sat down with the two managers of the team, not only to interview them, but also because it was rather chummy. We had a few drinks and a chat and so on. Who was the manager of the San Francisco Golden Gales? Ferenc Puskás. Ferenc Puskás, the Hungarian legend. And who was the manager of the Vancouver Royals? Bobby Robson. Bobby Robson, England's legendary manager and legendary footballer. Wow, it's amazing where they crop up. I don't know that Bobby was a refugee from any sort of revolution, although I must say that the England of the 70s was worth escaping from. It was a pretty awful place. But Ferenc, of course, had escaped during the Hungarian Revolution. Oh, that's a little sort of a bit of a memory of me, for me. But it's amazing who you do meet under most unusual circumstances in this country as a result of something that happened years before, and for reasons which had been forgotten. Now, why don't we have a little jig? Because one of the things I found this morning is something called Jack Tar, and it's the United States Naval Academy Band. And why shouldn't we listen to something like that? Let's give it a go. that doesn't get the blood stirring, nothing will. I don't know where the time goes to. I suppose it's because I'm talking to myself. That it goes quite quickly. I always enjoy talking to myself because quite often a lot of other people won't talk to me. But here we are. It's 25 minutes into a 30-minute program. And we were bang on time on the air this morning. So it's now 6:55. 5 minutes to 7 in Lewes in the United Kingdom. In East Sussex, which is on the south coast, or along the south coast. In fact, East Sussex, well, all of Sussex, has some of the most beautiful coastline anywhere in Britain, and it's so varied. It is wonderful. And if you are a tourist and you want to come to this part of the world, all you've got to do is walk along the seashore. And there are delightful little towns. Seaford, which is a quiet little place, and leads to a ridge of white cliffs, those cliffs that the fighter planes used to, returning from the war, used to fly and look for, and once they saw them, they knew they were safely home. The Seven Sisters. If you've ever seen that curve of white cliffs on anything in it, photograph, it's used widely, well, that's where we are. Not very far away, anyway. And then if you want to go the other way, there's Brighton. Oh, ho, ho. Talk about a seaside town. That's the place for young people. I like Brighton, but I quite like it in the winter, when you go down and the crowds aren't there. There's always a forlorn feel about it because there aren't that many people on the beach, on the pier. A lot of the things are shut down for the season. Of course, we don't have a Punch and Judy anymore because of the politically correct people who don't like to see two puppets bashing one another. No, well, generations who want to deny themselves fun. It's up to them. We've already had it, and I'm not a bit ashamed of it. Because I haven't got an ism in me. I don't really care. Now, I mentioned China, and I'm actually 27, 28. I haven't got that long. So I'm going to play again. Why not? I can do it. I'm going to play Rose, Rose, I Love You, because if I had a relationship with the Chinese during the last war, it was this lady that kept us smiling on a Sunday morning with the king of the DJs in those days, except he wasn't called a DJ, Jack Jackson. Here she is.